I'm joined by Mesa Gifford on Talking Pints. Mesa, welcome.
Cheers, absolute pleasure.
Great to have you here. Now, let's have a look at you in Kiev last week. Let's play this footage of you in the streets of Kiev. And this was last weekend, was it?
It was, that's correct.
I saw men, I saw women, I saw people from all walks of life coming together, arming themselves and going off towards the front line to fight against the Russian state, which has invaded their country. It's currently destroying communities, attacking innocent Ukrainian people, and people are angry. They're furious. They're the people who sweep the streets of Kiev. They're the people who cook your food. They're the ones who serve you your beer. They're all coming together, picking up guns and defending their country, and I respect that.
We're going to come to why you were in Kiev a few days ago. We're going to come to you fighting on the front line against ISIS in Syria, about what you're trying to do now, about the mess the government's in, with Liz Truss saying, yes, of course, if you want to go, you can go, and that then gets contradicted by Ben Wallace, and then Boris says something else. But who is Mesa Gifford? Who are you? What's your life been?
Well, my life has been quite interesting, particularly of late. So my background is I worked in the City of London for a number of years. Before that, I actually worked as a human rights activist. I spent a lot of time with the MDC, the Movement for Democratic Change in Zimbabwe. I worked in the Congo for a number of different charities there, particularly pygmy charities. And I in 2009, fell into the city. But it wasn't something I was particularly passionate about. But then in 2014, with the rise of ISIS, the horrendous images on Sinjar Mountain, the women and children trapped there, the use of sex slaves, some as young as 9 years old, just moved me. And I was furious that the British government had no plan to defeat and degrade and destroy ISIS. So I decided to take it upon myself to go out and fight back against ISIS alongside the Kurds.
It's a fairly extraordinary thing for somebody working in the City of London to do, isn't it?
Sure. Well, then again, you worked in the City of London. You took on the EU bureaucrats.
Yeah, I did. And they made my life very difficult. They were deeply unpleasant, but they weren't going to kill me.
That's true. And I have to say, it's particularly frustrating to see, and I agree, I do want people to support the Ukrainian people in battle. I know we're going to come to this, but I found it particularly frustrating to hear Liz Truss and others support British men going out to join the Ukrainians. But actually, a lot of Brits who joined the fight against ISIS were harassed, got themselves arrested.
Yeah. Anyway, you decide to do this.
Sure.
You'd had no previous military training. Mm-hmm. So what do? You mean you just sort of hitchhike to Syria? I mean, how does it work?
It was a very modern conflict in the sense that the Kurds were under attack by a force that was winning. ISIS had steamrolled over Syria and Iraq, butchered tens of thousands of people. And the Kurds were fighting for their very lives. And they called out for international volunteers, very much in the same spirit as the international brigades that fought the fascists there. And and we were recruited off Facebook. I flew out to northern Iraq, crossed the border. I went through a period of training alongside the Kurds. But it really was an amateur's war. It was Kurds with very little training battling against ISIS, fanatics, sure, but also fanatical terrorists, butchers, particularly butchers who are particularly barbaric if you're kneeling in front of them, if you're a journalist or you're a young Yazidi girl. They were no match to British soldiers or to anyone who's remotely professional. So it was just a case of First World War type battles against a peer that was very similar in many ways.
And the casualty rates, for those of you that
Monumental.
volunteered, I mean, of those of you that joined the sort of the international dimension of this.
It was, I think about 10% of foreigners died. In certain battles, it was 50% of foreigners that went to the front line were either killed or injured. 12,000 Kurds died. Far more than the international volunteers. It took a toll on the international.
How did you cope? How did a city boy cope with being on a battlefield with death on that scale?
Well, I think it's a case of saying, look, during the Second World War, you had British men and women who signed up, and they came from all walks of life. And they were almost forced into showing a little bit about themselves. What was their character? And it was forced on them by conscription. Here we had young men and women going out to join the fight against ISIS, and they were people like... Jack Holmes, who was a painter and decorator before going out, and he died fighting in Raqqa. So there was a young lad, just 22 years old, who won the trust and the love of the local people and died fighting against the Islamic State. And he showed the best of himself in many respects.
Well, you saw all of that, and you were quite shocked, I think, with the lack of medical care that was available.
Yeah, well, in 2016, I was seeing people die from the most basic injuries. People were bleeding to death by being shot in the arm. So when I got back, I set up a medical unit. I brought in some ex-service people from Britain and America. And we trained, I think, about 350 Kurds in battlefield aid. We distributed about 400 IFAC kits. And we actually provided an ambulance service as well. And we ferried something like 900 casualties in a year back and forth between the front line and the hospitals. And that was all, it cost me about $5,000.
I'm going to say, where did the money come from?
Well, I fundraised most of it. We got a lot of the equipment was provided by the Kurds. For example, we captured an old Assad ambulance, which I had repainted, redone up. I went to this American base, knocked on the door, and they gave me some equipment, oxygen.
Very entrepreneurial stuff.
It was, oh, absolutely. So, but it's at the end of the day, it shows you that if you're willing to push yourself, if you're willing to stand in solidarity with people, you can make a difference. And you can be anyone, an ordinary guy. And it doesn't have to be on the front line in Syria. It could be in any walk of life. Yeah, I hope there's a message there as well.
Well, in a way, isn't that what we're seeing? And your report from the capital, and we've been talking for the last 2 nights to Adam Holloway, the Conservative MP, who's
good guy. I know him well.
I'm sure you do. I mean, there's no war zone Adam doesn't go to.
No, absolutely, including Syria, actually.
Of course.
Yeah.
But he was bearing witness yesterday to people. I mean, the sort of almost shades of 1914 and Kitchener and Your Country Wants You, and people are queuing up. They're making sure the families are going west to safety, and they're getting ready to fight, and they're prepared to take the risk of the ultimate sacrifice. There's something almost... I sense in the last 48 hours what we've seen with the leadership of the Ukrainian president and with these people volunteering to go and fight against a hugely superior force in terms of numbers. I think people in this country are warming very, very strongly to this. Do you feel as strongly, do you personally feel as strongly about what Mr. Putin's forces are doing as you did about ISIS?
Not necessarily. It's a very different kettle of fish in the sense that ISIS was a death cult.
Yeah.
These are the most vile people on the planet. And I think it was actually the clearest cut, in terms of a morality perspective, the clearest cut battle since the Second World War, since the fight against Nazism.
So you saw it as good v evil?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, and that may seem naive, actually, to some, but actually, hopefully people will remember exactly what ISIS was at the time, the images of people being drowned in cages. Let's not even go there. There's most appalling crimes. So, but when it comes to Putin, he's also a fascist leader. He's rolled back, excuse me, on any notion of democracy in Russia. The new laws, the anti-LGBTQ laws that he's brought in. So he's a deeply unpleasant man. And on top of that, we've got Ukraine, which has suffered because of Russian influence over the last certainly 5 years. It's been a terrible war. 10,000 people have died. But Putin, at the end of the day, wants to force his will on the people of Ukraine, and Britain should not allow it. So I totally support anyone who wishes to go out and fight alongside this sovereign state.
So what's your plan for this particular conflict? So
my plan at the moment is to... I've been back for a very short period of time. This is the first time I've actually appeared on anyone's show.
Well, no, thank you for coming.
It's great to be here. I mean... I think the next step for me is to focus on building a website that will encourage, well, not encourage, but facilitate, because I don't want to encourage anyone, but at least facilitate anyone who's a former service person, anyone who's in the NHS, particularly trauma surgeons, engineers, that sort of stuff. If you've got any of the skills, and at the end of the day, there is some major capability gaps within the Ukrainian armed forces. If you've got the skills, why not apply if you wish to? So that's very much something that I've taken on, and hopefully that'll be up very soon.
And do you think people will go?
I do. People are already going. I mean, I have a very close friend, Aidan, who's already on the front line fighting. He fought with me in Syria. There are other British men who are also fighting on the front line as we speak. There are others who are going out. This is a very uncontroversial war in the sense that I think already you're seeing the British government and the British people rallying behind the Ukrainians. So, long may it continue, as far as I'm concerned.
No, well, I get the passion. Now, let's sort of head into sort of quite difficult territory here. You know, you're talking here about individuals who decide they want to go, and frankly, the government can't stop them. But when you got back from Syria, I mean, you were questioned under the Terrorism Act, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, sure. But this is the frustrating thing. I was quite frank with them in the sense that if you arrest me, if you put me on trial, put me in front of a jury, and I will take you to the cleaners. Because at the end of the day, about 10% of those that fought alongside ISIS and the jihadis ended up in court. So why on earth would you put Mesa Gifford or indeed anyone who fought against ISIS, why would you arrest us in greater numbers? Why would you come after us when you've got so many bigger fish to fry, as it were? There are literally thousands of people of interest to the security services in the UK. And the Crown Prosecution Service, they have made some terrible mistakes in the past. And I've always said the same thing. Common sense is what this country needs.
There are people with British passports who fought for ISIS freely walking the streets of this country, aren't there?
Absolutely. Yeah, and even if you are successfully prosecuted, you can only get sort of 3-4 years in prison. Shamima Begum, for example, is likely to only receive just a few years in jail. There are people a lot nastier and more vicious than Shamima Begum. She's just the tip of the iceberg. For me, the reason I sort of campaigned so ferociously about of getting her back to the UK is that once you open that door, the floodgate is opened. Other people will use exactly the same excuses to make the same journey back to the United Kingdom. So at the end of the day, we have to put the British public first. We have to keep in mind our security services, which are already overstretched. And that's where people's focus should lie, not on...
So I'm beginning to get the feeling here that we go from, charity aid worker to the City of London to fighting on the front lines, to doing what you're doing now as a facilitator. It sounds like politics is next for you, Mesa.
I don't know.
I sense it.
I don't know if I can deal with a lot of the politicians, though. But you never know. I think what this country needs is a dose of common sense, is ordinary people. I've got quite a large social media following, and one thing I do like to see is particularly ex-service people running for Parliament. Adam Holloway is such a great guy, and it's very much people like him and others that I want to see in Parliament.
So political question, Mesa.
Sure.
If we introduce the no-fly zone, that would, without a doubt, aid those who safely want to leave Ukraine to do so, but might risk direct jet-to-jet confrontation with Russian forces, which could lead to planes being shot down, which could lead effectively to us being in a state of war with Russia. Should we do it?
I think it's too late for that. By the way, I'm not speaking now I'm not speaking from the heart. I'm speaking from the head here.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, we need to be supporting the Ukrainians. I think if you wanted to introduce a no-fly zone, if you wanted to deploy troops, you do that before Russia invades. When Russia sends in 150,000 troops,
it's a bit late.
When you start ratcheting up, it actually is far too late. And I'm probably going to get it in the neck from a few of my Ukrainian friends here. What we should be doing is arming and supporting the Ukrainians. We should be bringing the economic might of the West on to bring to bear onto Russia. And if I'm absolutely honest with you, I think there is going to be regime change. But it's not going to be the Ukrainians there's going to be a regime change.
I think you're right.
I think there's going to be a Putin regime.
He's overreached.
I do think.
Mesa, I could talk to you for hours But thank you. You're a man of great passion for joining
Cheers.
me on Talking Pints.
Thanks.